And with that, I would like to invite Karen Castelletti, my co-host, to talk to me. Hello, Karen.
Hi, Gadi. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm excited to talk about the idea of fake news and disinformation with all of you and with our many amazing panelists and guests today. The idea of any of these ideas, fake news, disinformation, they're not new. The idea of using information for strategic influence is about as new as Sun Tzu, and is perhaps it's intrinsically human to tell stories, to change stories, to create different beliefs in people with how you tell those stories and how they get echoed. And so one thing I want to, I find interesting is, why is this such a topic now? What is going on now in our world? And I think what's really new and different and interesting, and why we wanted to put this together, is that the scale and the scope of the problem has really changed with technology. You didn't used to have individuals able to reach a third of humanity overnight, and it's inherently very new.
Well, I can tell you that this is not only about politics, as we'll discuss and try to avoid, but as a foreigner, the one thing I found interesting is the two sides of the US argument, the two main sides of the US argument on various topics, actually agree on one thing. And that is that the other side is using fake news and not always are even aware that is actually the case with our side. So bottom line, it's a loaded subject. It's a loaded term. What does it even mean? When I say fake news, people often just immediately jump at a specific president, a news channel, specific country, a social network, and the discussion ends there. As I recently heard from SJ, who will be on the second panel and can tell us who that was, a friend of hers recently called most or many of the discussions on the topic admiring the problem. And I really hope that in today's sessions, we can go deeper than that, because I feel that's kind of a totem-like response. It's almost an emblem, like we worship at these words, and I want to get kind of more than that. Does that make sense?
It does, and to frame it as a problem, what the problem is, I think, is questionable. If the problem is that humans communicate and are effective at it, I'm not clear that it should just be suppressed. I think of art a lot, which has this tremendous power to influence the world and other people's opinions. And been thinking lately about what live art is really prevalent in humanity. And I've been chewing on the idea that the most successful and widespread forms of live art in the world are actually religious ceremonies and churches and these gatherings.
Oh, kind of like hymns, the story about hymns.
Oh yeah, so the churches of Europe, this is from a documentary I saw like 20 years ago, but they weren't centralized. And one approach that as I recall, one of the things the Vatican did to try to assert control and normalize the ideas was to distribute hymn books. So they were using these pieces of art and songs, music to really be an early version of mass communication.
Mass communication is, you'll appreciate this. Mass communication is actually, I came to appreciate art. I was this STEM-based kid. What are emotions? What is all this stuff about? Stuff, essentially. It doesn't have numbers in it. And I watched this documentary, speaking of documentary, about mass communication, and they showed a coin with the likeness of Xerxes from Persia on it. And they said this was the first time in history where art was used for mass communication to help control of the empire. And that was kind of interesting. And on what you mentioned, the problem isn't you.
You would never have seen Xerxes except for every time you touch money.
So, yes, I suppose that is true. That made me appreciate art, though. So the problem isn't new. And one example I like, if we leave Sun Tzu aside for a second, is Catherine the Great. She had this internal to Russia, not an expert historian here, view and how people saw her. And then when she communicated with the West, it was a completely different thing. It was a Renaissance, New Age, whatever you would like to call it thing. Voltaire appreciated her a lot. And I think what's shifted, if we're to bring this in, is the ability for any organization, or even an individual, to weaponize speech, making it an asymmetrical challenge. And this used to be limited to a capability of nation states, powers, or organizations of similar levels of powers. And the same thing from the other side, this can now be used not just against nations, but against organizations and individuals specifically.
Yeah, it's interesting. All the examples that we've been talking about are rulers of nation states or worldwide organizations, and yeah, we see it very differently now. Though, Gadi, like you say, you take a stance on this that I'm not sure anyone else that we have here today agrees with, and
Oh, no,
nor do
don't.
I. That
We really
everything,
don't.
all of this is entertainment. We should just take nearly everything as entertainment. So,
Well,
what's
uh,
and I before even letting you go further into that, I kind of want to speak to like why is that bad. And there we see a lot of material that is a very questionable basis. We're not all going to become experts in everything, but what's being undermined here is really the fact itself. Facts matter. I think it is. If we have to have the argument as low down as do facts exist and do they help you prepare better to be fit to your environment, to face the world, I think we'd have a very difficult time arguing up from that point. And that is a lot of what we're seeing in the world. Like I am sort of two tribes. If you will talk of the U.S. political viewpoints, there are different tribes. The one that I grew up in is not really the one that I've chosen and am surrounded by more today, but I'm still in both social bubbles, and I get to see how it's a unique perspective to see how both sides are very internally consistent and reasonable, but it's the facts, not so much the values, but the actual facts that they're basing things on that have really wandered from one another over the years to the point where if I accepted one set of facts or the other, I would have one of two completely different viewpoints. And this is new and alarming. It's almost a large step back for society.
I can see that. On entertainment, I'll say it's just that I appreciate fake news or whatever you want to call it, disinformation, misinformation. Our lovely Professor Brad Allenby will talk about weaponized narrative, which I love and you love. But essentially, when I do things every day, I can't stop to think so much. I can't make so many decisions every day. So for me, everything is entertainment. Everything is positive. Everything is fine. If I actually need to go and do something, I'll research it. I think it's unreasonable to ask people to do that for everything. But I do agree facts matter. I will say, not being an expert on humanity as a whole, I don't want to make these decisions every day. So I believe we need to stick with it. I don't think anybody would agree with me, but we need to kind of, to a degree, without giving up on fighting it, see everything as entertainment and not try to force people to go against their nature.
I mean, this is where like scale and scope creep back into the conversation. In a very real sense, we never used to have or have the opportunity to have opinions on everything. The information wasn't available to us, and there was no opportunity to convince ourselves that we could be experts on everything. I don't know anything about farming, but I now feel that I could go learn it if I Googled the right thing.
Well, people say the age of the internet, the age of information, it's also the age of discourse. We are all affected, we're all influenced. The reason we're talking about fake news, it can be weaponized and is used against us daily. And I even would often feel that we're taking extreme positions more and more, or even as a performative stance, not necessarily our opinions to discourse. And we kind of have to, if you look back, and forgive me, my American history is off, it wasn't him, I think, but the message in the Revolutionary War, when Paul Revere went out there, if it would have been, the Brits are kind of okay, they took care of us during famine, and they take care of us with when we're ill, but the taxing of teen, man, that wouldn't have worked. You had to take a strong stance. And, I think you kind of had some points on that, but bottom line is the inherent challenge in countering all of this. How do we avoid infringing on free speech? Do we delete an influencer's post if it's fake news? How do we, even if we try to do something to counter it all, it ends up going to a different audience. For example, a hot button issue somebody is against, do we do a for? Doesn't even change the entire operational aspect of this. And people usually say, when I ask them about countering fake news, going technical, whitelist or blacklist it, give me a choice, some sort of reputation system in my browser, on Facebook, whatever it is. Let's fight bots, let's take down fake profiles, or education is the solution for all. And of course, it's part of the solution. But I would like to go beyond that. I would like to be more specific. So our expectations, in a way, is for us people in tech, who are dealing with the adversarial nature of things, being asked to deal with this phenomenon and more, and that is not necessarily right for us. So my expectation from the second panel is to go into detail on how this can be done.
This is also a good moment to make a quick point about how we want to run the panels and the conversations today, which is that where possible, we would like to keep this conversation, which we know can be really controversial, constructive, by avoiding some of these totem entities where possible. Obviously, there will be specific points that folks want to make, but you know, by trying to lean out of rather than into the problem and bring as many folks to the table as we can. That's something that Gadi and I are hoping to instill in this conversation today. There's also a good opportunity to turn it over to some of our guests. Gadi?
Absolutely. So we're going to bring in our special guest today, David Weber, who is an amazing science fiction writer, a friend of the show, been here a lot. The Honor Huntington University is something he created. We appreciate him a lot. Hi, David. Malka Older. Hey, Malka Older was just so competent in his alma mater in every university she ever attended, which is a huge name, and is successful and wrote Infomocracy and changed the language around how we speak. And she's also joining us as the moderator for the first panel. And Sunil Yu, who is one of my favorite people, is joined me on many different projects before. He's currently CISO in residence at Wild Ventures. He was chief scientist at Bank of America, done a lot of really cool things. Hi, Sunil. Hi, Malka.
Hey, folks.
So we would like to just turn it over to you. We had a challenge defining what politics is. How do we stay away from it in this discussion? How is that even possible with the discussion on so-called fake news? And this is a great way for you to just take it away. So let's start with David, go to Malka, and then Sunil.
Oh, start with me. I think that a lot of what Gadi and Karen were talking about how long the use of fake news has been a part of the human condition, really needs to be fundamental to any discussion going forward. Ebooks, for example, have done for book sales what Gutenberg did on steroids. And that's precisely what we're looking at here in terms of the amount, the degree of information that is now available to us. We've reached a point where we have so much information that we have less information because we simply can't process it all. And I think that's one reason why in some cases we are more prone to seek out our bubbles, those tribal elements that you were talking about, Karen, because it's pre-filtered for us in that group. And we only have so much time, so much capacity to devote to it. In that respect, I really don't think it's a solvable problem. I think that it is an issue of learning to live with it and deal with it, hopefully, as a society. And that, I think, requires less that we are able to eliminate fake news than we are to acknowledge the existence of fake news on both sides of any question, any equation. That we have to understand that our tribe is producing fake news, shaped narrative, whatever you want to call it, just as much as the other side is, and be kind of evaluative on that basis. And so that's where I'm coming from on this. And that's, what can I say?
Fair enough, appreciate it. Malka.
Yeah, I tend to be pretty leery of ideas about not discussing politics in any of these things, partly because I think it's impossible not to discuss politics when you're talking about this or really anything. That's my sociologist, socially constructed background. Also because I think it has a tendency to push people towards a kind of both-sidism that isn't always very useful. That said, I do see the point of trying to avoid, particularly in a discussion like this, rehashing the he said, or this side is right, this side is wrong. It's just not particularly useful either in terms of convincing people or in terms of getting out something new, which I think is what we're trying to do here, and really analyze the problem and think about what some potential responses are. I also, I agree with the discussion that has gone on so far about how this is a problem that is not new. It has been around for a long, long time. And certainly the technology has affected it, both the way it happens and the scale on which it happens. But I would argue that one of the really important distinctions about this moment is that we are in a time where we at least claim to live in and believe in democracy. And so we're in a time where people are actually expected to make decisions about the way that they are governed. And to do that, you need to have good information. You need to have access to information. And so that's the point, I think, where this is getting more and more important.
And as far as, so first of all, I want to be able to clarify one bit of fake news. So I am not a fake news expert. I am a technology expert, and or at least I think I can hold my own in that space. So I'm thrilled to actually be amidst a whole bunch of people who actually do consider themselves to be experts in this space. What I would love to be able to get out of it, first of all, so I live in Washington, D.C., so I can't escape politics being where I am. So if we can have a respite for the next 2 hours talking about politics, that'd be great. But that's it. I mean, it's going to be hard to avoid politics. And so hopefully we'll navigate away from that as much as we can throughout this discussion. What I would love to be able to dive into is going to be, I would love to learn out of this whole conversation, even just understanding not just the fake part of it, but what is truth? What is truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth? And how do we actually discern that? How do we have foundations for that? And in this postmodernistic world, can you even determine what fake news is if there's no definition of what's truth, right? And so being able to explore some of the philosophical aspects of that would be also very interesting. And we have a great set of guests who really have bona fides in the fake news space that I think we're going to have a great discussion and great dialogue to dive into that deeper. So back over to you, Gadi.
Thank you, Sunil. Appreciate it.